Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Well, hello, everyone. I know you're used to hearing Tom introduce the podcast, Emotional Sobriety, but Tom is away this weekend. He's attending the funeral for his brother and there to support his sister. So first of all, Tom, our condolences go out to you. You know, I love you, man. We love you. And looking forward to your return next week. Today is going to be I'm very excited about the show because it's going to be a little different. Patrick is coming up on his birthday, Patrick, right? Coming week.
Yeah, I one day at a time, God willing, but I will be celebrating 4 years of continuous sobriety.
4 years of continuous sobriety. And you've never had that much time before, have you?
Never, no, not since I was probably 16 years old.
Well, that's a different. So I mean, sobriety then and sobriety now, because this one you've worked hard to create a solid foundation for your life. So you know what this presented us with is an opportunity, you know, to explore emotional sobriety in the first 4 years of somebody's recovery. You know, what a lot of people consider the first 5 years as early recovery. So you said, God, I'd love to share with you guys my journey in emotional sobriety. And so let me turn the show over to you, Patrick, and I'll ask you questions as we go along. But first of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I know what this means to you. I mean, I really do know how much it means to you to have this experience in your life at this point in time.
Sure. You know, it's the framework through which I view so much of my waking life, and to the point where I wonder if I'm like overdoing it. You know, I mean, not everything necessarily needs to tie back to recovery, but I think for me, I fear losing it all the time. That's a big driver, I think, of the way I go through life. I don't know how healthy that is, but it's gotten me this far. So we'll see.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through a few areas and talk to you about these areas. So, you know, first, physical sobriety, right? Before emotional sobriety. What changed for you that you could accept that you suffer from this addiction? And what happened that you made a commitment to your recovery? Do you know what that turning point was for you?
Yeah, the turning point was, you know, waking up one morning on a weekend, and it was after a long bender, and I had lost my latest job, and my room was a mess, and I also torn up my parents' place partying, which I was not living at, but they, you know, I had a key, I could get in and out and whatnot. And I just, you know, I'd either, from what I remember, I'd either just finished a call with my mom or became aware of the phone call that had to be made, where I was yet again needing to be excused, forgiven, accepted by my parents, who I just were repeatedly disrespecting and, you know, alienating with my crazy behavior. And, you know, I just kind of had this like vision of a bottom that was far lower, where my parents wouldn't be picking up my calls. And to the extent that I had any relationships with anybody, those would just evaporate because, you know, I just become that kind of like toxic of a person to be around and threatening to, I mean, I just think addicts kind of, you know, they become like zombies. You know, you just need to put up the fence and keep them out. And I just didn't want to lose what little I still had left. And so I asked for help. I started to see a new therapist. I started to see Alan Berger for addiction issues. I went into a 30-day program, inpatient, to get a foundation at the start of physical sobriety. And I just started to work the steps and just do the kind of, Coca-Cola Classic recovery model just to get started.
Well, I recall, it was that moment of surrender for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a moment, man. I recall that you were struggling. What do I really need to go and pay? I mean, do I really need to go to a 30-day program, right? Remember that there was a real struggle for you in terms of, do I really need to do that? And I remember when you just let go.
Yeah. I'm happy that you articulated it that way, because looking back now, I mean, there was no reason not to do it, but like
a lot of reasons to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
So many reasons to do it. But I think, just like principally, it was to take that step was kind of an admission that, okay, I'm really doing this. We're really doing this. And, making the decision that my life is going to change. Don't know what's going to happen on the other end, but yeah.
And see, I think that's what creates resistance for people. See, at that moment when you're confronted with, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I know what I need to be doing, but if I let go of this, I don't have anything. I don't have what's coming yet, what's coming next. I know what I've had here, even though it didn't work that great. It was something, right? I had something. And I think that creates a lot of resistance for people, man. It's like, if I let go of this, what's going to happen? And some of that fear is unconscious, I think.
Right. It breaks my heart a little bit, just thinking of it, because it's the refusal to cut the anvil that's dragging you to the bottom of the ocean, because it's the only thing you know.
It's a good analogy, because it is, right? It's taking you down, but it's all we know, and we're holding on to it. That was the beginning of you, establishing your physical sobriety.
I want to say that it hasn't always been easy, but I've had such miraculous help from people like you, from my very supportive family, from the kind of like, over time, people came back into my life who I thought were gone for good, that really were rooting for me, and showed this kind of like incredible capacity for forgiveness and empathy. And, it hasn't been like a completely unobstructed road, but like, I just feel like, man, like my just experience of recovery has been like, I've seen the best in people more than I've seen the worst in people. And I've been encouraged, I feel like, consistently throughout, to just keep going for it and to not turn back. And, any kind of like incentive to return to my old life, that's kind of like, it's a bad deal. I just, whenever I've played out, kind of those scenarios, I'm like, you know what, that just doesn't sound very appealing.
No, I hear that you value so much what you have today. And that's an important part. But I want to stay focused a little bit. See, so what we say is that in emotional sobriety, and I'm going to speak about this in general, and we'll bring it back to you here in a minute. See, our relationship to our problems has to shift. We have to look at our problems in a different way. And let's just stay specifically on the first thing, right? You going into treatment and, surrendering to the fact I'm an addict and I need help to establish, my sobriety, to establish being clean and sober. Well, some of the resistance is also, it's related to what we said about the fear about what's next, but it's also related to this weird thing that goes on. You see, the way I describe it to people, Patrick, is that our false self says, I shouldn't have this problem. I should be able to figure this out. I should be master of my universe. That's right. Right. I should be able to handle this. And so the mere admission is that I'm unable to seems to take away from us, not add to us. You follow me? It's like it's the false self is saying, if I admit that, it means I'm less than. If I admit that I have this problem, if I admit I need help, if I admit I can't do this, it means that I'm less than. And everything in the false self is to be more than instead of less than.
Well, that's where I can see I have so much work to do, because I feel like I still have that, I still have.
It's a big deal, man, unraveling this whole thing. And see, that first thing is that first, I think of it sometimes as a moment of grace, is where we realize, even maybe for a moment, that getting help for this doesn't mean that I'm less than, doesn't mean that I'm bad, doesn't mean that I'm defective. It means that I have a disease that I need help to deal with. And so all of the judgment and moralizing that can go on with this whole thing can be suspended if somebody can really embrace that idea that this alcoholism, drug addiction is a disease. Our brain changes. We're not doing this because we want to. We're doing this because we have to. I mean, we are being controlled by our addiction. But even admitting you're controlled by something seems to take away from the false self. So there's such a quandary at the beginning. And that's why so many people that need help don't get it, Patrick. They can't get over that bump. They can't get over seeing me getting help is really a sign of courage, right? It's a positive thing. It's something to feel good about, not something to feel bad about. But our false self turns that kind of stuff around. And that's what I say. The original gaslighting took place with us. Before we were able to gaslight anybody else, we had to fool ourselves into believing certain things were true that weren't true. And this is one of the big lies, I call it. This big lie that admitting I have a problem, admitting that that I've made mistakes and stuff makes me a mistake. It doesn't. It just makes me human. But I could never see that as clearly as I can see that today.
Right. And I mean, what helps that process along, or at least it did for me, is just the hitting that bottom, that kind of dissolution of the ego to the point, right, where I'm open enough to take those steps. And, but I've still got a lot of shoulds. And I think resistance to the idea that it's not a moral failing, but a disease. I think that's something I discovered semi-recently, is that, like, I still have, I think, some guardrails against accepting that.
Well, see, I think one of the reasons that delusion or illusion persists is that that's the part of us that's saying, I still want to be able to be in control of everything. I still want to be the one that's in control. See, that's what the false self is. Father Richard Rohr called it the Imperial Self, that wants to control everything. I mean, it wants to be the king of the universe, right? That kind of master of the universe kind of thing. And, when we step back and look at that, we start to realize, my God, this is why we say that we're megalomaniacs with inferiority complexes. We think so great of ourselves, and at the same time, we think so little of ourselves. It's a real weird dilemma. But I want to take you to that now. Now shift your reflections and talk about the relationship with yourself. When you were first getting sober, how did you feel about yourself? What were your thoughts about yourself? How'd you like yourself? Let's start there.
There's a detail that surprises me, even as I talk about it, that at least initially, and when I was in rehab, I had this immediate rush of, like, real positive feeling, because I was in a facility with a locked door, and I had no choice. I had consigned myself to this space and doing this work and these meetings and, these counselors, and there was a feeling of peace I had, like, right at the beginning, just that came with live a little bit of a life, even if it's just for these first few weeks. But I think, like, coming out of rehab and going to my first few AA meetings back in my neighborhood, and not, you know, I didn't have any money at the time. So I didn't have any dollars to put in like the jar that they would pass around at the meetings and stuff. And just kind of, I didn't have a car, you know, so I, you know, learned really quickly about the kindness and the generosity of the people that I would go to these meetings with, because they would, you know, I would carpool with people and stuff, and get all kinds of help, you know, once I demonstrated that I wanted to, you know, do the work. But I felt my self-esteem was pretty rock bottom for a while that first year. You used to tell me we would do I would come to therapy. I had a real problem with eye contact for a while. Like I couldn't look at people in the eye. My body language was very like, I just kind of had, you know, right at the end of my addiction, I had this like pervasive feeling of, I just like had to slink around in the shadows and didn't really like want to exist, because I felt like, you know, what I'd become, I just hated what I'd become. And I just couldn't even be in a place and feel normal. That was kind of like the extent to which I had annihilated myself. And so that was what I began with. But it's just amazing. Like, you know, I still think it's corny. There's like a, you know, sardonic kind of like putting down myself and others part of me that is still lingering, where like when people say it's amazing what this program can do, I have a kind of regard that with a bit of skepticism. But I mean, it's like that has been so true in my experience. You know, just like I could not have imagined how much better of a life I've been able to attain. And it all started with just taking those few steps.
Yes, it did. And it's interesting too, isn't it, that there's still that conflict inside of you. One part of you being sardonic.
Kind of a dick, yeah.
And then the other part, so excited about it. So I see what it's done to my life. But you see, and I wanted everybody to hear that. See, in our journey, it doesn't mean we become whole right away. And I don't know if we ever become whole. You know, this whole issue of integration and integrating the conflicting parts of ourselves. It's very important to pay attention and do that. But it's also important to be aware that it's a lifelong journey to do that. You know, it's still unfolding for you, right? These different parts of you.
Right. Man, it tripped me out. Earlier this week, I did a workshop with Herb Kagan, and I was relaying to him, I was having just kind of a bad mood that day. And, you know, I just wanted to kind of give him a state of the union as to, I just wanted to let him know how I can get sometimes when I'm in a mood. And, you know, I was honest with him that, like, you know what, there's still a part of me that finds the idea appealing of just getting a pint of liquor and just like hiding somewhere and just, you know, tuning out and just throwing it all away. Like, that's not to say that I indulge in that fantasy often. And I know exactly where kind of mulling that will lead. And I quite like the alternative experiences that I've been able to cultivate over these 4 years of recovery. But, you know, he, in his very Herb Kagan directness, he's like, well, you know, look, you got to work better steps 9 through 12. And, you know, how proactive are you being, and, you know, in taking those steps. And, you know, I didn't take it so much as a, you know, condemnation of the thought, but more of like, the work becomes, you need to work to mediate, you know what I mean? That like very self-destructive negative part of you that will always be a part of the sauce, right? There's just steps you can take to address that and to kind of like put it in its rightful place.
Because in one way, what that part of you is saying is, I don't think I can step up and handle this stuff. See, it's a hidden form of a lack of confidence in yourself. See, that part is saying, be just so much easier to get the pint and hide out. Mm-hmm. And it would be. I mean, there's no question. Listen, you know, part of what changes is our idea about, that life is going to be difficult. We don't shy away from that. We realize is that life is difficult because I don't have all the tools I need to have to deal with life. And that's what makes it difficult. And when we start to accept that, then we can get on with starting to acquire some of those capacities that are undeveloped in us. Well, talk about that. How are you dealing with some things differently for you? I mean, one thing is it's not listening to that thought about going to get the pint.
Right. And let me just say,
right. I mean,
yeah, I'm very embarrassed just to have even said that. It sucks. Like I just find those ideas shameful.
There's that should you talked about again.
Right.
See, I should be more than I am. See, that's what the false self tells us all the time. I'm not enough the way I am. And I think I'm very happy that you shared that with us. I think it's great. A lot of people out there have these kinds of thoughts and they're too embarrassed or too ashamed to share them, thinking it means something's wrong. No, something would be wrong if you didn't share it. I mean, see, that's the issue.
Well, right. Bring it out into the light.
You see what I mean? See, having it and sharing it shows you have a program of recovery.
Yeah, I believe, talking about answering your question. Yeah. So how do I, what are some of the strategies that I deploy?
Right. So one of the things is you're bringing things into the light that you wouldn't bring into the light.
Staying connected. I have a recovery circle and I have a familial circle and I have a friend circle and I have a work circle. And, and I'm always making sure to check in with those and being accountable to those and trying to make myself useful to the people that are connected to me, that care about me, kind of saddling myself with as much purpose as I can in order to, to not wander into a space where I can only describe it as like a kind of nihilism, that I have. Like if I'm not in the process of, if I'm not in a kind of like action oriented headspace, then I can get pretty dark and I can start to kind of like get into a mindset where I justify the kind of self-destructive behavior that we were just talking about. So I think that's like the cornerstone. And then, attending meetings, physical fitness, diet, sleep, creativity, which, luckily for me, my creativity and my employment situation kind of intertwined. And I'm a video editor and I podcast and I write screenplays and I'm able to kind of like, not always, but I'm able to satiate kind of like, this kind of creative self-actualizing impulse, while at the same time, filling in, submitting a W-9 and, kind of adulting in that sense. And I do think these are all related to recovery because I just like have this feeling 4 years in of like, I'm actually a person now, or I feel like a person as like when I was not sober and I would look at pictures of, friends and their families or people just engaging the rat race of regular life, that I was not participating in because I was just, my whole existence was organized around getting loaded. And there's just like no room to be of use to anybody or to kind of like, be the kind of person that people know or want to know. And I just feel like I've moved very far away from that. And it's probably in large part due to me engaging with all those things.
Yeah. Well, I go back to what you said about when I first met you. You could not look me in the eye. You were filled with so much self-hate and so much shame about the life you had lived. And, if feedback I'd give you is one of the things that I've seen happen is that you've come a long way in accepting yourself and what's gone on. You still have some self-hate. I see that. Still have some shame. I see you struggle with that at times. But it's so less than what you had before. so much less. And, now, you're really starting to, your potential, the possibilities for you are really starting to shine.
I appreciate that. And,
well, man, you've made a big contribution. Just look at what you've done in terms of the support you've given to me and Tom in our quest to kind of get this information out. You're solely responsible for that Institute of Optimal Recovery and Emotional Sobriety, and having over 60 videos now that thousands and thousands of people are viewing because of you. Because you supported us, you put them in there, and you are now, passing it forward, man. You're helping a lot of people by doing that.
Did you find when you were, let's just say several years into your recovery, like was the road ahead? Like, did you have a sense of it? Or because I feel like I'm at a point now where I know I need to be in action, and I need to be of service. And, I think that just having an awareness of that and a willingness is enough to grease the wheels, to get you moving. But I still do have kind of like, there's a fog and I'm not sure exactly what I'm moving towards. And I do have a lot of self-doubt as to am I going in the right direction?
Right. No, look, and I think that that's still unfolding for you. For me, it became quite clear after about a year or so that I wanted to work with people. So my passion and became my purpose in life is to go back to school, become a clinical psychologist, and to, help be able to develop the skills and ability to be able to help people, turn their life around. Partly because I was so excited about what was happening for me and the gift that my sponsor and many therapists who worked with me early on in recovery had given me, and I wanted to pass it on. And so that I had that clarity very early on. It was quite a mountain to climb because I was a high school dropout. So wanting to become a clinical psychologist and become a PhD in clinical psychology meant a lot of school. And if you saw me in high school, I didn't care for school at all. It got in the way of partying. I wanted to go put on some rock and roll music or some Motown, and pour some drinks and have a party. I mean, let's dance the night away kind of thing, right? That was what I was looking for. So this was a real shift in my consciousness. And so I had that clarity I didn't know what that would look like, because look, first I had to see if I could get through school. I couldn't rely on any previous experience because I was a total flake in high school. I went to college with no high school. My first year of high school, even though they passed me, it was a joke. I didn't do any work. Literally, I had no high school education when I started my college career. So it was about making up, right? I had to take like the first English class before you could take the real English class. And I had to take the math class before you could take the college math class. I mean, there was a whole year of preparation to get me ready to handle college that I had to go through, which I was willing to. I realized I needed to do that. And then, then the momentum started, but I was clear that's the direction I wanted to go. What I see for you is I think that somehow your life is going to be involved in recovery professionally and to some degree, whether you're going to continue to do podcasts, films, write scripts about recovery or whatever. I just see this as becoming more and more part of your life.
I can't imagine my life without it. I just feel like the strain of not only like pushing back against the demons and reaching out to others and kind of help others extricate themselves from it.
So we talked about your relationship to your problem, addiction, your relationship to yourself. Now talk about your relationship with others, especially your romantic relationship, because that's been quite a big part of your journey.
Yeah, I am in a 3-year relationship. We just celebrated our anniversary, and
congratulations, Patrick and Maddie. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, Maddie. It's like, in many ways, it just feels like my first real romantic relationship. I think I had a lot of problems with codependency with prior relationships, and that's kind of something that there's the aspect of that I think I bring to all my romantic connections. That, like, in this case, we're actually, both of us in our own ways, we're just trying to do it for real. And I'm fortunate. I mean, like, as we talk right now, I feel like it has been an especially wonderful few weeks with Maddie, and I'm very happy I've made it this far, and I hope there's much further to go. But it's been challenging. We've done couples therapy, and there's definitely like tension in the relationship between like her priorities and my priorities, and
and trying to coordinate that and to figure that out. And see, I hope everybody can, when Patrick's describing this, that you put that in the context that is to be expected. See, I consider that to be normal for relationships, is that there's no such thing as a relationship that's not going to, create some form of conflict or tension. If I believe that relationships grow people, they're people growers. And the way they grow people is through friction, right? Is through grinding. And if you don't have that grinding, the relationship isn't going to be of value to you. A lot of people think, well, the grinding makes the relationship not of value. It's not supposed to be this way. See, that's another one of those big lies, Patrick. Conflict and tension and struggle in a relationship is exactly what's supposed to be happening. And it's happening not because that's the nature of relationship, but that's the nature of us. See, I'm incomplete. So where I'm incomplete is going to be where I'm going to struggle in my relationship with someone. That's where things are going to be difficult. That's where I'm not going to know how to hold on to myself or respond to a problem or to deal with a situation. And then I'm going to start to revert to old ideas, run away.
Wait. So is that to say that relationships that have the most conflict are because the participants have a lot of incompleteness?
They have a lot of work to do in terms of growing themselves up.
That makes sense for me then. I think there's a lot of incomplete.
A lot of work to do. I mean, and that's all it means. It doesn't mean it's wrong. But see, I think I see a lot of people come up with the wrong conclusion. Wow, there's so much conflict. This is the wrong relationship for me. Now, it may be, but it may be the wrong relationship because you're not ready to do the work that you need to do to be right. Now, that's not to say if you're in an abusive relationship and somebody's beating on you, we're not talking about figuring out how to stay in that relationship. You got to look at taking care of yourself first, and in those situations where somebody is physically, then you say, well, how about emotional abuse? That becomes a little grayer area, right? If somebody viewed verbally abusive, yes. You want to clean up that stuff. I don't want to be verbally abused, but I also don't want to put all these rules on somebody else and how they have to behave. And this is where not taking things personally. So, if somebody's putting me down all the time and they don't like me, I need to ask myself, what am I doing in a relationship if somebody doesn't like me? I mean, that's a different thing than somebody who gets mad at me and says, you're a real asshole, Burger. That's a different thing. That somebody might call verbal abuse. I say that's just somebody getting mad and doing the best they can to take care of it. So we want to differentiate some of these things out. We don't want I don't want anybody to stay in a relationship that it doesn't have the potential to grow into what it needs to grow into for you. And some relationships don't. There's also there's irreconcilable differences. If you want something the other person doesn't want, trying to stay there and figure that out isn't going to work. If one party wants a child and the other party doesn't, that's not going to turn out very well.
My relationship with Maddie, it's the kind of like the most present relationship in my life. She's the person that I probably have the most engagement with day in, day out. And so I kind of I don't know. I look at my success in that. I don't know if it's as right or wrong, but it's like a microcosm of like my relation to people in general, and how well am I participating in that, and how, and talking about being of service and selflessness. Like I can be pretty selfish, I think, in the relationship, and I think it's always up for debate. Like, how selfish should I be, or how giving am I being, to this other person? And I don't know. I'm still working on it. Like, I think the jury's still out, but I really love her. I think she's so wonderful. Like I'm so proud of the time I've spent with her, and it's people growers. I like that. I mean, I've got a lot of growing to do, but I think I have grown a lot. Within this time.
Well, look, you've hung in there, and you've really tried to learn from every. I've witnessed that. You've learned from every struggle and every challenge that you get confronted with in this relationship. And I think that that's the key, man, is I say it all the time, is stay connected and add more self. Stay connected and add more self.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's going to grow you like to stay connected to a relationship where there's tension and struggle, and add more of yourself.
100%. And I didn't want to let this episode pass without observing that a little after a year into my sobriety was when the pandemic happened. And so most of my time in recovery has been kind of under this unprecedented, in many of our lifetime, it's stressful situation, real frightening situation. And I just wanted to get your take on it, because I was talking to somebody about like, well, do you think that a lot of people kind of like relapsed, or they had an especially rough time with with recovery during COVID, and what came up for me immediately was like, there's no good time if you're an addict to put the plug in the jug, or it's like no matter what time it occurs, it's the hardest decision most addicts will ever have to make. And, I think like it has, it's still ongoing, and it's been rough. But I'm so grateful that I had a little bit of a foundation before. Right. Because I don't even want to think about like how rough it would have been had I not been in this more healthy frame of mind, when the pandemic started. So do you ever think of that? Or?
Well, listen, I would want to ask our listeners, especially those of you that have entered in recovery during COVID and you've gone to virtual meetings, maybe you could share with Tom and I and Patrick what that's been like for you. For me, I see it as a mixed bag, right? As most things are, right? The mixed bag being there's nothing like the face-to-face contact, sitting down across from someone, being in the same room, being present with them, and talking to them about what's going on in their life. There's a power to that. I think that I wasn't sure that being virtual would capture that same energy, and I think it's close. I think it's 99% there most of the time for me. The mixed bag part is that I do think that there's some people who've had a harder time, because when I walk into a room virtually, there's not somebody that's going to come up to me after the meeting and say, "Hey, Al, let's go have a cup of coffee," right? At least I haven't found a way to do that virtually.
No, they're working on it, probably.
They're working on it. But see, I think that's the missing piece. If a newcomer comes into a meeting, a bunch of people are going to be around them afterwards, talking to them, making sure they get numbers and stuff. That still happens to some degree, but not in the same way I think that it happens when we're live. So I think that's a negative, right? The positive that I see is that our world of it, meaning the number of possibilities of attending meetings, has just exponentially increased. We see this in the Thursday night emotional sobriety meeting I started. I could have started that meeting in Westlake and maybe I got 10 or 15 people. We get between 150 and 200 people showing up from all over the world. Well, how would that have happened if we weren't virtual? It wouldn't have. See, and that's, to me, the other thing is that, especially for this emotional sobriety stuff, I think the word is spreading a lot quicker because of COVID and because we've been virtual. I've given more presentations on emotional sobriety the last 2.5 years than I've done in probably the last 10 years of my career. I mean, think about that. And I speak a lot, right?
It's incredible.
I speak a lot before this. And now, on a regular basis, I'm talking about emotional sobriety, in a public forum, at least 10 times a month. That was never the case before. Maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times. So that's the other part of this, is that I think that it's given us, I've gotten to speak at meetings. I spoke at a meeting in, over in the Middle East a couple months ago. That would have never happened. I was invited to talk about emotional sobriety there. So that's to me, the mixed bag part of this. I think in terms of that, it's really given you and I and Tom and, all the people that are interested in emotional sobriety a forum to be able to carry this message in an unprecedented way.
It's the rare time when everybody kind of stopped and reflected and started to ask some new questions.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for opening up your heart and your experience and your life to us. It's really great, man. I appreciate you being who you are.
Man, I so appreciate you walking through this with me, and I would like the unfolding to continue. I like that word you use, unfolding. I don't want to be the same guy sitting here at the mic.
Next year we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about the changes from this one to next year, and when we're doing this podcast, because there will be changes, man. Look, to me, 5 years was an incredible shift for me in my recovery. I think I started to get rocketed into the 4th dimension from year 5 on, because of all the work I had done in the first 5 years. Started to really pay off.
I'll continue that momentum.
Yes.
All right. Until next time.
Until next time.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.